The biting wind of late autumn, 1898, swept through Oakhaven, Pennsylvania, carrying with it the crisp, earthy scent of decaying leaves and the distant, somber toll of the old church bell. St. Jude's, a venerable edifice of grey, weathered stone, had stood as a silent sentinel over the valley for nearly a century, its steeple a lonely finger pointing towards a perpetually clouded sky. Decades of relentless Appalachian winters and oppressive, humid summers had exacted their heavy toll on the structure, leading the current pastor, Reverend Elias Thorne, a man of quiet contemplation and deep historical curiosity, to finally secure the much-needed funds for its extensive restoration. The work itself was painstaking, a slow and deliberate process, with local carpenters carefully prying away ancient plaster and dislodging crumbling lath, revealing the skeleton of the old building. Each creak and groan of the lumber seemed to echo with forgotten whispers. It was on a blustery Tuesday, as the afternoon sun, a weak and watery disk, cast long, distorted shadows across the nave's dusty floor, that a young apprentice named Thomas stumbled upon something truly peculiar. He was diligently working near the main altar, his chisel carefully chipping away at a section of plaster that felt unusually resistant, almost as if the wall itself were reluctant to yield its secrets. Behind what appeared to be a loose and slightly dislodged stone, tucked deep within a small, almost imperceptible cavity, lay a small, tarnished tin box. It was no larger than a man's hand, its surface dulled by the passage of time, secured with a clasp of heavily rusted metal that defied easy opening. The silence of the vast, echoing church seemed to deepen around him. Thomas, with the innate and insatiable curiosity inherent in his youthful years, carefully, almost reverently, pried open the rusted clasp. Inside, nestled amongst a thin layer of dried, crumbling leaves and fine ancient dust, lay a single, neatly folded letter. The paper, though undeniably brittle and fragile with age, bore an elegant, flowing script, its ink faded to a sepia tone, but still remarkably discernible. The date, meticulously scrawled at the very bottom of the page, sent an involuntary shiver down his spine. October 27, 1844. A sudden chill, unrelated to the autumn air, permeated the space. He immediately called for the foreman, Mr. Abernathy, a gruff but fundamentally fair man who instantly recognized the profound significance of such a remarkable find, his usual stoic demeanor momentarily replaced by a flicker of awe. The letter was handled with the utmost care, a fragile artifact pulled from the maw of time, and was promptly brought to Reverend Thorne. The pastor received it with a palpable mix of scholarly reverence and a nascent sense of trepidation. He understood, with a clarity that settled deep in his bones, the potential weight of such a discovery, a direct, unadulterated voice from the distant past, echoing from the very foundational stones of his sacred church. The small tin box, remarkably preserved despite the relentless march of decades, strongly suggested deliberate concealment, a purposeful act of hiding rather than a mere accidental loss or oversight. As Reverend Thorne, his hands trembling slightly, gently unfolded the ancient letter, a faint, almost ethereal scent, akin to dried lavender or perhaps forgotten wildflowers, wafted delicately from the paper, filling the quiet study with an unexpected fragrance. The elegant script, while undeniably beautiful in its composition, proved challenging to decipher in certain sections, the ink having bled slightly over the passage of generations. He knew, instinctively and with a profound certainty, that this was no ordinary correspondence, no mundane record of daily life, but rather a meticulously crafted message intended to be found, a deep secret waiting patiently, silently, for its long-delayed unveiling. The air grew heavy with anticipation. Reverend Thorne retreated to the quiet sanctuary of his study, a small, intimate room nestled adjacent to the church sacristy. Its walls were lined floor to ceiling with an eclectic collection of theological tomes, ancient scriptural commentaries, and remarkably dusty historical accounts of Oakhaven's earliest days. The flickering, soft glow of the gaslight cast long, dancing shadows across the pages of the open books, creating an atmosphere ripe for unraveling old secrets. With meticulous care and a scholar's precision, he began the arduous task of transcribing the brittle ancient letter. The handwriting, as he had noted earlier, was indeed exquisitely elegant, yet the language itself was decidedly archaic, at times almost poetic in its phrasing, weaving a narrative that was both profoundly personal and hauntingly enigmatic. It bore no formal signature, only a solitary, enigmatic initial, M. The letter's opening lines were not a formal address, but rather a direct, almost desperate appeal, as if speaking directly to the future individual who would ultimately discover it. It spoke of a profound and enduring sorrow, a deep, pervasive loss that had seemingly settled upon the writer's heart like a perpetual, unyielding winter. The prose was imbued with a melancholic, ethereal beauty, painting a vivid, albeit somber, picture of a soul burdened by a truth too heavy, too immense to carry alone, yet simultaneously too perilous, too dangerous to openly reveal or share with others. The words resonated with a quiet desperation, a plea reaching across the decades. As he continued his painstaking transcription, a particular name began to emerge with increasing frequency, subtly woven into the very fabric of the narrative. Ilara. The writer, M., spoke of Ilara with an almost worshipful reverence, an adoration that bordered on the spiritual. Yet beneath this profound admiration lay a palpable undercurrent of creeping dread and profound fear. It quickly became unmistakably clear that Ilara was not merely a peripheral figure, but rather central to the entire unfolding mystery, a figure shrouded in a perplexing dichotomy of both deep affection and a pervasive, unsettling terror. The letter hinted at closely guarded secrets, hushed, whispered words exchanged in the dark, and eyes that, for reasons yet unknown, had seen far more than they should have. The narrative then underwent a subtle but significant shift, gracefully moving to describe the secluded and deeply isolated nature of Oakhaven during the mid-19th century. It depicted a community profoundly rooted in its long-held traditions, inherently wary of outsiders, and fiercely, almost possessively, protective of its own. This profound isolation, the letter subtly implied, had inadvertently allowed certain events to unfold within its quiet confines, largely unobserved and unquestioned by the wider world beyond the valley. The church itself, St. Jude's, seemed to play a particularly significant, almost pivotal role in these unspoken and concealed occurrences. A growing, unsettling unease began to settle over Reverend Thorne as the cryptic words continued to unfurl before his eyes. The letter, he realized with a chilling certainty, was far more than a mere confession of grief or a simple personal lament. It was a profound warning, a heartfelt cry, and perhaps even a desperate, silent plea from the past. It spoke ominously of a shadow that lingered, a deeply unsettling truth buried beneath the sacred ground, suggesting a literal or metaphorical interment within the church's hallowed soil. The sheer weight of these words, echoing from a forgotten and potentially unsettling past, settled upon the Reverend like the heavy, oppressive autumn air that pressed against the windows of his quiet study, chilling him to the bone. The very next morning, a pale sun barely piercing the lingering morning fog, Reverend Thorne, driven by an insatiable need for clarity, sought out the oldest living resident of Oakhaven, Mrs. Agnes Periwinkle. She was a remarkably spry woman, despite her 92 years, her mind as sharp and clear as newly cut glass. her memory an expansive repository of the town's long and intricate history. He presented her with a carefully transcribed portion of the letter, judiciously omitting the more cryptic and potentially disturbing passages, hoping to glean some tangible insight into the local history and prevailing atmosphere of 1844. Her ancient eyes, though somewhat dim with age, held a flicker of deep remembrance. Mrs. Periwinkle, with a lifetime's worth of Oakhaven stories etched into the very fabric of her being, recounted tales of the church during that distant era. She spoke with a surprising clarity of Father Michael, the stern yet deeply beloved priest who had faithfully served St. Jude's for decades, a man renowned throughout the valley for his unwavering, almost rigid faith and his notoriously reclusive nature. Her voice, thin and reedy like the rustle of dry leaves, grew stronger as she spoke of the small, tightly knit community, the close-knit families who had lived, loved, and died within its embrace, and the long, often isolating, quiet winters that defined life in Oakhaven. She then paused, a thoughtful frown creasing her ancient brow, her gaze fixed on some distant, unseen point. She recalled a vague, persistent rumor from her own childhood, a hushed whisper passed down from her grandmother about a mysterious unrest that had inexplicably gripped the church for a significant period around the mid-1840s. Specific details were agonizingly scarce, tragically obscured by the relentless passage of years and the natural human tendency, perhaps even a subconscious desire, to suppress or forget uncomfortable, painful truths. "They say," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper, "that something happened, something profoundly sad, that no one dared speak of openly. It was like a shadow over the valley." Reverend Thorne, his heart pounding a quiet rhythm against his ribs, pressed gently, his voice soft and respectful, asking if she remembered anyone at all, named Ilara. Mrs. Periwinkle paused again, her brow furrowed in intense concentration, her lips moving silently as if tasting the unfamiliar name. "Ilara, Ilara," she murmured, a flicker of recognition passing through her eyes. "But there was a child, I believe. Yes, a quiet little girl, but she vanished, didn't she? Vanished without a trace. Or so the story goes. A ghost in the wind." Her voice trailed off, a distant, profound sadness suddenly clouding her ancient eyes, reflecting a long-held sorrow. The sudden, unexpected mention of a vanished child sent an undeniable, icy chill down Reverend Thorne's spine, a sensation that permeated him to his very core. The letter's pervasive lament, its profound undertones of pervasive fear and deeply concealed sorrow, suddenly took on a new, far more sinister and heart-wrenching dimension. Was the shadow that lingered, as described in the cryptic letter, intrinsically connected to this mysterious and unrecorded disappearance? The fragmented pieces of the puzzle, though still frustratingly incomplete, seemed to be slowly, inexorably aligning, beginning to reveal a narrative far darker and more unsettling than he had initially, in his most apprehensive moments, dared to imagine. Driven by an intensifying sense of urgency, a pressing need to uncover the full truth, Reverend Thorne dedicated the following days to meticulously poring over the parish records. These ancient bound ledgers, carefully stored within the church archives, were filled with the meticulously recorded details of births, baptisms, marriages, and deaths, a tangible, undeniable link to Oakhaven's entire past. His fingers, now stained with the ancient ink and fine dust of disintegrating paper, traced the names of generations, each entry a silent testament to lives lived and lost within the valley. The air in the archives was thick with the scent of age and forgotten stories. He found the entries corresponding to Father Michael's tenure, specifically focusing on the year 1844, the year marked on the discovered letter. Father Michael's neat, precise script filled page after page, recording the routine rhythms of life and death. There were numerous baptisms of swaddled infants, solemnized marriages performed under the watchful eyes of the congregation, and the unfortunately constant toll of disease and old age that defined life in the 19th century. But amidst these routine, predictable entries, he found no record whatsoever of an Ilara, no birth certificate, no death record, no mention of a child fitting the vague yet unsettling description Mrs. Periwinkle had provided. It was as if, in the official history of Oakhaven, she had simply never existed. This profound absence, the sheer blankness where a life should have been recorded, was, in itself, a chilling and deeply unsettling presence. The letter spoke of Ilara with such vividness, such profound, almost agonizing emotion, that her complete and utter lack of presence in the church's formal records was profoundly unsettling. Could she have been an orphan, perhaps, unbaptized, undocumented, living an ephemeral existence on the very fringes of the community, known only to a select few? Or was her existence, for some deeply unsettling reason, deliberately and meticulously erased from the official written narrative of the church? The questions gnawed at him. The letter also subtly hinted at a deeper, almost spiritual connection to the church's physical structure, speaking ominously of sacred ground and things hidden within its very foundations. Reverend Thorne began to entertain an unsettling thought. What if the secrets of 1844 were not merely confined to the fading memories of a few select individuals, but were physically and inextricably intertwined with the very architectural foundation of St. Jude's itself? The chilling thought of what might lie concealed beneath the ancient, worn floorboards, or tucked away within the hidden, concealed nooks and crannies of the massive stone walls, sent a fresh, icy shiver down his spine, prickling his skin with dread. As dusk slowly, inexorably settled over the quiet, vast expanse of the church, illuminating the dancing motes of dust in the fading shafts of light filtering through the intricately stained glass windows, Reverend Thorne felt a profound and almost overwhelming sense of isolation. He was utterly alone with a mystery that had lain dormant, undisturbed, and forgotten for well over half a century. A cryptic whisper from a long-sealed grave, now demanding, with an almost terrifying insistence, to be heard and understood. The deeper he delved into the unsettling narrative, the more questions arose, each new query leading him further and further into the veiled, shadowy history of Oakhaven, a labyrinth of silence and forgotten truths. The extensive renovation work on St. Jude's continued, progressing slowly but with a methodical steadiness. Reverend Thorne, now almost entirely consumed by the deepening mystery of the letter and the enigmatic, vanished Ilara, found himself overseeing the painstaking construction work with a newfound, almost obsessive intensity. He made numerous inquiries, requesting any old architectural blueprints or construction plans that might still exist, desperately hoping they might reveal previously unknown hidden passages, concealed rooms, or perhaps even forgotten crypts beneath the venerable church. After an extensive and arduous search through dusty parish archives and forgotten storage chests, a set of faded, hand-drawn plans, brittle with age, were finally discovered in a forgotten, cobweb-laden chest in the church's vestry. These ancient plans, meticulously dated back to the original construction of the church in the early 1800s, revealed a particularly peculiar and unsettling anomaly. There was a specific section beneath the main altar that was simply enigmatically marked unassigned space, an exceptionally unusual and vague designation for such a central and profoundly sacred area within a church. Furthermore, the plans clearly showed a small, unremarked crawl space located directly beneath the oldest part of the church, precisely near what would have been the original, foundational cornerstone. The architect's intentions for these spaces remained utterly unclear, adding another layer to the deepening enigma. Reverend Thorne immediately approached Mr. Abernathy, the foreman, to discuss these unusual and highly intriguing details. Mr. Abernathy, a man who harbored a profound respect for the sanctity of the church, but also possessed a healthy, pragmatic dose of practical curiosity, readily agreed to investigate the cryptically marked, unassigned space beneath the altar. Work commenced in that specific area with an almost surgical precision, carefully removing more of the ancient stone and mortar that comprised the altar's immense, centuries-old base. The air grew heavy with the pervasive smell of freshly disturbed earth and the fine dust of pulverized stone, a tangible sense of anticipation hanging in the air. The space, which initially appeared to be nothing more than solid, impenetrable rock, slowly, tantalizingly, began to reveal a hollow cavity, an expertly concealed chamber, barely large enough for a person to stand upright within its confines. It was not, as some had initially speculated, a traditional crypt, nor was it a secure vault. Instead, it was a small, meticulously constructed chamber, a space clearly designed for secrecy and concealment. The chamber itself was utterly empty, save for a few brittle fragments of dried, unidentifiable organic material and a faint, lingering scent that permeated the air, a delicate, almost floral aroma, hauntingly reminiscent of the lavender-like fragrance that had wafted from the original letter. The unexpected and profound discovery of this hidden chamber sent a jolt, an electric current of revelation through Reverend Thorne. The meticulous care with which the space had been concealed strongly suggested a secret of profound importance, a chamber deliberately designed to hide something or someone. The unmistakable floral scent, so strikingly similar to the one emanating from the aged letter, cemented his growing belief that this secret chamber was directly and irrevocably connected to the mystery of Ilara and the unsettling events of 1844. The utter silence of the empty space, however, was deafening in its lack of answers, offering no immediate or clear explanations, only a profound sense of unspoken history. Reverend Thorne returned once more to the fragile letter, his mind reeling with the new and chilling knowledge of the hidden chamber beneath the altar. He meticulously reread every line, every faded word, with an intensified focus. The words now seemed to reverberate with unsettling, unspoken meanings, subtly hinting at a sanctuary or a place of refuge secreted within the church's sacred, ancient walls. The enigmatic initial M at the letter's end began to take on a more definite, horrifying form in his mind: Father Michael. It was a truly terrifying thought, almost sacrilegious, that the esteemed and revered priest of St. Jude's could be so deeply entangled in such a profound and unsettling secret, a truth so dark it had been buried for decades. The letter explicitly spoke of a burden of truth, a suffocating weight upon the writer's soul, and of a promise made under duress, suggesting coercion or an agonizing choice. It described Ilara not merely as a child, but with an almost spiritual reverence, as a beacon, a vessel of a purity too rare for this world, and a light amidst the growing darkness. This elevated, almost mystical language, spiritual in its intensity, hinted at something far beyond a simple, mundane tragedy. Was Ilara somehow exceptionally special, perhaps possessed of a unique quality or insight that set her apart? And what unspeakable promise could have been so binding, so terrifying in its implications, that it led to her mysterious disappearance and her ultimate concealment within the very fabric of the church? The narrative within the letter grew steadily darker, more ominous, as Reverend Thorne continued to decipher its cryptic passages. It spoke chillingly of whispers from the congregation, of eyes that judged, scrutinizing and condemning, and of a power that sought to control, an unseen force exerting its will upon the community. It painted a haunting picture of a secluded community gripped by a silent, insidious tension, a pervasive fear of the unknown, and perhaps even a deep, unsettling fear of something within themselves, something primal and unacknowledged. Father Michael, if M was indeed him, seemed to have been tragically caught in the crosscurrents of these hidden anxieties and profound communal fears. A man torn between his vows and a terrifying reality. The letter concluded with a profound, almost desperate plea for understanding, a fervent hope that the truth, though buried, might one day see the light, offering a glimmer of redemption. It was a confession, undeniably, but one so cloaked in layers of metaphor, veiled references, and poetic lament that its precise, raw meaning remained agonizingly elusive. The writer had clearly been desperate to preserve a truth, to leave a testament to a profound injustice or tragedy, without risking direct condemnation, exposure, or an outright explicit revelation that could shatter the fragile peace of the community. Reverend Thorne felt a deep, overwhelming compassion for M, for the evident, profound torment that had driven him to such desperate and extreme measures, to conceal such a haunting secret within the very walls of his sacred calling. The secrets of Oakhaven, he realized, were not merely about a single vanished child. They were about the profound human cost of pervasive fear, of prolonged communal silence, and of the agonizing burdens carried by those few who bore witness to unsettling, unspeakable truths. The weight of this understanding settled heavily upon his shoulders. Weeks melted into months, carried away on the relentless current of time, and the extensive renovation of St. Jude's church slowly but inexorably neared its completion. The hidden chamber beneath the altar remained utterly empty, a silent, hollow testament to a forgotten and profoundly unsettling secret. Reverend Thorne, despite his exhaustive research, the meticulous transcription of the letter and the fragmented clues he had painstakingly gathered, found himself unable to definitively piece together the entire, complete story of Elara and Father Michael. The parish records, scoured repeatedly, offered no further tangible insight, and Mrs. Periwinkle's fragile, fading memories had yielded all they possibly could, leaving him at a perplexing impasse. Yet, the profound presence of the ancient letter and the very concrete existence of the expertly concealed chamber within the sacred confines of the church had left an indelible, almost spiritual mark on Reverend Thorne. He would often find himself standing quietly near the newly restored altar, a faint, almost imperceptible floral scent still clinging stubbornly to the air around the meticulously sealed stone where the letter had originally been found. It was a scent that spoke not only of the passage of immense age and the delicate fragrance of dried blossoms, but also of a profound, enduring sorrow that the relentless march of time had not, for all its power, been able to fully erode or dispel. The people of Oakhaven, while undeniably curious about the enigmatic letter's discovery, largely accepted Reverend Thorne's carefully crafted explanation that it was a deeply personal, though undeniably cryptic, testament from a former parishioner, likely suffering from an overwhelming, profound grief. He chose, with considerable foresight, not to reveal the full, unsettling implications of his deeper discoveries, understanding instinctively that some truths, once unequivocally unearthed and exposed, could irrevocably disturb the fragile, hard-won, peaceful facade of a community too deeply, perhaps even irrevocably, for it to ever fully recover. Some secrets, he reasoned, were best left in the shadows, He often found himself contemplating the true power of the letter, pondering if its real significance lay not in its ability to reveal every single detail or provide conclusive answers, but rather in its profound emotional resonance, its uncanny capacity to evoke a past sorrow that still resonated, vibrated even in the very ancient stones of the church. The haunting ambiguity of the narrative, the multitude of unanswered, lingering questions, became an intrinsic part of the church's unspoken history, a silent, almost ethereal layer beneath the familiar, comforting hymns and the solemn, whispered prayers of the congregation. The elusive floral scent, sometimes stronger, sometimes almost imperceptibly faint, became a constant, almost spectral companion for Reverend Thorne, a pervasive presence in his daily life within the church. It was a subtle, yet persistent, reminder of Ilara, of the enigmatic Father Michael, and of the myriad unspoken stories that lay irrevocably buried beneath the comforting veneer of daily life in Oakhaven. The Church of St. Jude, once merely a venerable place of worship in his eyes, was now for him a sacred repository of a profound human mystery, a silent, unwavering witness to a deeply unsettling truth that continued, even after decades, to whisper from its ancient hallowed walls, as the final, meticulous touches were painstakingly applied to St. Jude's, and the congregation gradually returned to worship within the beautifully restored, echoing nave. An air of renewed peace and quiet serenity settled gently over Oakhaven. Yet, for Reverend Thorne, this hard-won peace was undeniably tinged with a quiet and persistent melancholy, a subtle undercurrent of unresolved sorrow. He would often find his gaze drifting involuntarily towards the altar, to the precise spot where the enigmatic letter had been found, and to the now resealed, hidden chamber beneath, a silent witness to a truth only he fully knew. He understood, with a profound and somber certainty, that the intricate mystery of Ilara and Father Michael would, in all likelihood, never be fully and conclusively solved. The precise nature of the shadow, the true, agonizing meaning of the promise made under duress, and the exact, chilling circumstances of Ilara's vanishing remained stubbornly veiled by the impenetrable mists of time, forever beyond his grasp. Perhaps, he mused, it was indeed meant to be so, a testament to the enduring, almost mystical power of secrets, and to the inherent human tendency to conceal what is too agonizingly painful, too profoundly frightening, or too fundamentally disruptive to openly confront and integrate into the accepted narrative. The letter itself, now carefully preserved in a climate-controlled cabinet within the quiet sanctuary of his study, remained a powerful, almost living artifact, a tangible link to a buried past. He would, on occasion, carefully retrieve it and reread its delicate, faded lines, each time finding new nuances in its archaic prose, new, profound depths to its sorrowful and enigmatic plea. It served as a constant, silent reminder that history was not merely a dry collection of documented facts and dates, but a rich, intricate tapestry woven with the threads of profound human emotion, pervasive fear, and a multitude of unspoken, often painful truths. The church, now standing beautiful and fully restored, held within its very architectural fabric the haunting echoes of 1844. The lingering, almost spectral scent, the inexplicable existence of the hidden space, the faint, persistent whispers from the past, all contributed to an atmosphere that was subtly, undeniably, profoundly different from before. Reverend Thorne carried the profound burden of this secret knowledge with a quiet, almost sacred reverence, understanding that some mysteries are not ultimately meant to be definitively solved, but rather simply to be remembered, to be carried forward as a testament to the complex, often sorrowful tapestry of human experience. And so, The haunting story of Ilara, of the enigmatic Father Michael, and of the ancient hidden letter became an inextricable part of Reverend Thorne's own personal burden. A silent, profound benediction whispered ceaselessly within the ancient, sacred walls of St. Jude's. The unceasing autumn winds continued to blow through the quiet, isolated valley of Oakhaven, carrying with them not only the familiar scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter, but also, for those who listened closely enough, the lingering, ethereal scent of a story that, despite all efforts to bury it, stubbornly refused to be forgotten, a silent cry echoing through the ages. If you like this type of stories, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.